And they explained to me that even the devil believes in God. And I asked them, I said, where did you get this knowledge? I actually knew, I had written a paper in college about Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. And so I understood that they were probably some derivative of that black nationalist movement. But I asked them what their source was for this claim of my satanic nature. And they gave me some verses from the Bible, Book of Daniel, I think. And I said, no. If I want the Bible, I can go down the street to the Jew for Jesus or to some other Christian. What about your book? Don't you read the Quran? And they said, yes. And so they gave me some verse to read from Surat Al-Kahf. And I took it home. I took home the paper that I wrote it on, and immediately I went up to my bookshelf where I had the Quran that was given to me about 6 years earlier by my friend Mansour. And I started reading. I looked for the passage that they had directed me to. And of course I read it, and there was no indication there that I was the devil or that any other white person was the devil. But since I started reading, I went to the beginning of the book, and I just began to read. And I read, and I read, and I read until I fell asleep with the book in my hands. And the next day, I read, and I read, and I read when I had some free time. And any time I had free time, between classes, when I was commuting to school on the New York City subway, I was just reading the Quran. And it moved me in a way that other books hadn't. Certainly in a way that the Bible didn't. The Quran's directness and the fact that the Lord of the worlds, right, the Creator, as the book describes the author, is speaking directly to you at times, very direct way, very intimately. It moved me in a way that I had not felt before, and I can't tell you where or when exactly. I know that there were times that I would read it, and sometimes I could feel tears in my eyes and running down my face. Sometimes I would read it and the hair on my arm would stand up, or on the back of my neck. And I can't pinpoint precisely the time or the place, but at some point I think that I had realized that I was reading the words of God. Well, around New Year's of that year, this is, I guess, about 1990, January of 1990, I was out with some friends from high school. We were having coffee, and we were just talking about what was going on in our lives. They asked me, what do you believe these days? Because they knew me when I was a communist, and they knew me when I went through many different phases as a young person. And they knew me as someone who didn't really believe in anything. So they asked me, and I said, well, I believe in God. And they said, really? What God? I said, there's only one God. And they said, where did you get this from? I said, well, for me, it was from reading the Quran. And they said, so you've been reading the Quran, so you must believe that this is the message of God and Muhammad is the messenger of God. And I said, yeah, I guess so. So they said, okay, let me get this right. You believe that there's only one God and that Muhammad is his messenger. I said, yeah, when you put it that way, I do. And they said, you're a Muslim. And I laughed. I said, I'm a Muslim? You're a Muslim. You're from Pakistan. I'm just a guy who believes in God. They said, no, you're a Muslim. If you believe that there is no God but the one God and that Muhammad is his messenger, you are a Muslim. And I was in shock. For the next few days, had to think about what that meant. And I contacted my friend Mansour, the one who had given me the Quran when I was 13 years old. He was at University of Pennsylvania, and he was working in the Muslim Students Association there, I think. I thought I'd heard that. And so I asked him if he could send me some literature that might, give an introduction to Islam, and also, the life and the requirements, I guess, of a Muslim. And he sent me a book or two, and one book in particular, Islam in Focus. I can't remember the author's name right now, but this book provided a very good introduction, not only to basic beliefs, but also to the 5 pillars of Islam. And I learned how to make salat. I learned how to pronounce the shahada. I learned how to make my wudu. All of these things from that book. And I started praying. I guess you could say I was a closet Muslim, because I was living in my parents' home at that time, and I would close the door and I would say my prayers. And even the first time that I ever fasted in the month of Ramadan, I did it completely on my own. I had no community. I just found out what time the sun would rise and what time the sun would set, and ate at the times that were permitted. And so for the first 6 or 8 months of my life as a new Muslim, I did this completely alone. And my guide was the Quran and the book of this scholar. And that's the story of how I embraced Islam, actually. At a certain point, I had to tell my family. And so this was sort of coming out of the closet. And one night at dinner, I was sitting with my family, and I told them, I said, I've been reading the Quran. They said, yeah, we know. We've seen you carrying it everywhere. And I said, I really believe it. And I said, what I've learned is that besides believing, there are certain practical implications of that belief, which I have chosen to follow also. So I guess that makes me a Muslim. My mother's reaction was very strong. She cried. And I think she asked herself, and probably looked at my father and thought, where did we go wrong? How did this happen? I think my father's approach was much more relaxed. He probably thought to himself, well, my son was a communist when he was 13. He was, a skinhead when he was 16. He went through so many different phases, maybe this is just another phase. And I suppose both my mother and my father were onto something. I mean, this was a phase, but it wasn't just a passing phase, or so I thought, or hoped. And my mother must have realized that I was serious. But of course her reaction was one of fear and regret, which I suppose are understandable when one is ignorant and only has distorted perceptions based on misinformation or limited information. So there were great challenges in those first years trying to communicate with my parents. I have to say, alhamdulillah, they are very understanding, and they've been very patient, and we've come to a better understanding. At first I think my mother worried that I would turn into some kind of a monster. But I tried to reassure her that, since embracing Islam, I'm a better student. I think I'm a better son, And, it wasn't as though I was a bad person before Islam. Maybe for some people, setting foot on this path is necessary for them to be able to reform themselves. In my case, I thanked my parents, actually, for giving me the values that I was able to recognize when I came to Islam. And as I said, I wasn't a bad person, inshallah. Islam has made me, makes me, and will make me a better person. So, everybody's path is different, how they get there, And even once they embrace Islam, everybody has a different way of understanding this path. For me, it has a lot to do with learning and knowledge. I think that the basic purpose of life, the basic purpose of Islam, is to gain knowledge. Knowledge of ourselves, knowledge of our world, of our universe, and knowledge of our intimate relationship with Allah. So this has propelled me into my career. I don't know that I would be a professor today if I hadn't become a Muslim. I'm not saying that everybody should be a professor, but for me it's been a long journey of learning and now teaching. Along the way I've gained a great respect and appreciation for other religions also, which I don't think I would have had I not had this grounding in Islam. And I think that something that new Muslims should take to heart is that, when one becomes a Muslim, one doesn't become a different person. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that people bring to Islam what they had before. So even among his companions, there were people who had special talents or challenges, and these are ones that they would have to continue to work with or to work on after entering the path. So similarly, I think I can say that's true for me. There are many challenges, and life continues to have its struggles. It just requires patience. For me, this is almost a 20-year journey, and only Allah knows how and where it will end. So my advice to new Muslims, or even to people who have been Muslim for a long time, is just to bear with patience and see what Allah will surprise you with. Not with fear, but with love and with hope. If there are non-Muslims who are hearing me today, I think you owe it to yourself to know as much as you can about the things in the world around you. Islam is certainly present in the world. It's almost unavoidable in the news and in the world around us. And if you don't know any Muslims, probably will at some point. I think it behooves all of us to know each other. So, if you're curious, there are lots of resources out there. If you're in Hawaii, give me a call. I'm at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the religion department, so if I can be of any help, let me know. And even to those people who are from Muslim families or who are, we can always increase in knowledge and in compassion and in love for each other. So it's that's my wish for all of you, and thank you for listening. With that, I say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.